Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we kick off a 2 week Flatliners retrospective with the 1990 film Flatliners. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's film, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming Young Captain Nemo series from Fievel and Friends Macmillan. With me from Los Angeles, Adam Foshko is Director of Story Development for Activision's Call of Duty, Skylanders, and Destiny franchises, including story consultant on the recently released, and I mean like 2 weeks ago released, Destiny 2. Say hello, Adam.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Fantastic, and welcome back. It's actually
Good to be
been
here.
it's like it's been a hell of a while, I think, since you were on the show. So I'm super excited that you're back. And yeah. Okay. And from the Rio Grande Valley, Professor David Bowles has received awards from the American Library Association, the Texas Institute of Letters, the Texas Associated Press, and to the dozen books he's written, he'll soon be adding Feathered Serpent, Dark Heart of Sky, Myths of Mexico, and a steampunk book, a YA steampunk graphic novel, Clockwork Curandera. Hola, David.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Fantastic, and also welcome back for you. It's kind of wild, because
Yeah, it's been a while since it
yeah,
was what was that? Oh my God.
I mean, was
It
it The
was
Exorcist?
that's right. It was The Exorcist, the beginning, right? That was what it
Are
was.
you serious? Is that
Yeah.
seriously the last time you were on was The Exorcist?
Yeah,
I
other
feel
than an
terrible
interview you did
about
with
that.
me in between. No, no, not at all. I'm
That's
at your
amazing. Oh,
disposal
yeah,
whenever
yeah,
you
yeah,
like.
yeah. We did a Castle Talk. We did an interview.
That's right.
Okay.
hmm
And finally, also in Denver, like myself, as always, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration. She is the chair of the Media Committee and member of the Access to Legal Services Committee for the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Say hello, Julia Guzman.
Hi, and it's the Colorado branch, not the whole country one.
Oh, okay. Very good. The Colorado branch of the American Immigration Lawyers
Mhm.
Association, or AILA. Yeah, welcome, welcome. Okay, this is such an interesting mix-up. This is like when the Fantastic Four, like when for whatever reason Johnny Storm and the Thing are like trapped in some other dimension, and we bring in different members of the Fantastic Four, and so I'm excited about this different alchemy, guys. So hello.
The only
Cool.
question
I
is,
think it'll be really
which
interesting.
one is Drew, the Thing or the Human Torch?
Well, that has yet to be determined. At some point, I'll suddenly decide. Okay, you're clearly Drew, and you're clearly Tony.
Yeah. Okay, Flatliners, a movie that I lay completely at Julia's feet. This is something that she begged to do. Okay, Flatliners is a 1990 American science fiction psychological horror movie directed by Joel Schumacher and starring Kiefer Sutherland, Julia Roberts, William Baldwin, Oliver Platt, and Kevin Bacon. The film is about five med students in like the wildest looking gothic med school I've ever seen who attempt to find out what lies beyond death by conducting clandestine experiences that produce near death experiments that produce near death experiences. There's a sequel with exactly the same name that's coming out very soon. Like in a couple of weeks, and it has Kiefer Sutherland again. So this is Flatliners. Let's get opening thoughts. Just a couple of minutes on like how you come to this movie, what your thoughts are on it, especially if you're like me and you haven't really given it much thought at all since it came out. Let's go Julia, Adam, David, and then I'll go. Julia, why are we here?
I haven't seen this movie in a long time, or hadn't seen it in a long time, and I just remember being unsettled by it. I remembered feeling like this one and a couple of things, Jacob's Ladder, were just stuck with me as being like just really messing with my head. And so I was like, I want to revisit it. It's not, horror per se, but it's definitely, kind of horrific in some ways. And of course, there's the sequel or whatever it is coming out next week. So I thought this would be a good time to do it. And it's not quite now that we've seen as many horror movies as we have seen. I find it was less upsetting to me than it was when I saw it in my youth. But I still think it's really interesting. It explores some really interesting themes, some ideas of not only what could be out there after you die, but also what is it doing to you when you have these either things that you feel guilty about or things that you feel responsible for, or just that you're beating yourself up about. What is that doing to your psyche, and does that continue into after you leave your body? At least the moments after you leave your body, if not forever. So it's all very interesting, and I think it'll be fun to get into some themes about even just. I don't know that any of us necessarily believes in like hell the way that it's portrayed in art and in the Bible and everything, or if it even is portrayed in the Bible that much. But anyway, but just the idea of hell and what hell is, and is this kind of what it would be? I think those are all interesting themes.
Excellent. Adam, what are your thoughts on watching Flatliners? I don't know if you've watched it since it came out, but what are your thoughts here?
It's been a while since I've seen it. I used to just call it like Near Death Young Gun, because it was, it came at a time that, Joel Schumacher was definitely on the rise. He'd done Lost Boys. It was a lot of style, a tremendous amount of style pumped into this. And there was definitely the studio saw an opportunity to, reach a particular kind of audience and to raise up, this new vanguard of young stars that were up and coming and getting traction. And this was, and this came at a good time, and it was interesting. This was sort of like Ghost Story meets Altered States, right? The whole idea of horror and the sins of the past, versus sort of this, light dip into stylistic metaphysics. And it was. I saw it in the theater when it came out when I was pretty young, and I remember sort of liking it then. But it was really mostly about the imagery and everything else. It's not a very deep movie. The ideas, the questions that it wants to talk about are deep, but they treat it at the story has to keep moving. So they don't dig into it particularly deeply in the same way that Altered States. I think Patty Chayefsky's book, when it was actually made into a screenplay and then into a film, I think they went a good deal deeper. But definitely entertaining, and I came at this having not seen it for many years. And I've been not enjoying it very much when I first saw it, but I found that I really enjoyed it in this viewing. It was rather nice. And maybe it was just seeing everybody young again. I don't know, but it was it was not a perfect film, I think, by any stretch of the imagination, but I really enjoyed it.
That's wonderful, and I love that. I love what you said was Altered States meshed with what again?
Ghost Story. Remember the film Ghost
Story, because it's an anthology. The book Ghost Story,
right,
really more than the movie.
But it's also but actually in the film Ghost Story, it was the sins of the past. It was like an event that the friends had shared in the past. It was the idea that you can't escape your past in some ways, and even though it's treated differently here, it's
but that's a really, really good point. In a sense, it almost is an anthology. It has, in other words, you could think of it as an anthology, with the framing device being each of them doing this near death thing. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I hadn't seen it either. In fact, I have a hard time remembering when the last time I saw it was. It may be that I haven't seen it again since it came out in theaters, though it seems really, really unlikely. But everything was really unfamiliar to me, although I do remember from my first viewing all those years ago, liking the acting and so forth. I really enjoyed, Kevin Bacon and Kiefer Sutherland, who were a couple of my favorite actors back then. And now rewatching it, it was good to see Kiefer back to his pre-Jack Bauer, leading man days, when he's like this creepy kind of sociopath that he played in a lot of films in the 90s. The kind of guy that you suspect is secretly a child molester and stuff. It's really kind of like really greasy, sneering, annoying kind of character. In Fire Walk with Me, he plays like a really extreme version of this kind of like anxious, weird, like freak that he was kind of known for in those years. Outside of some of those like young gunnish kind of films. So it was interesting seeing him and seeing, how little Kevin Bacon's acting style has changed. It's still like really endearing. And there were a couple of duds, but for the most part, I really enjoyed the acting this time around as well. It was also just really amusing it felt like all these scenes were being filmed on the set of Batman and Robin. That was the other thing. I was like, there's that, the one scene in the alleyway where
oh sure,
where the characters like looking up and there are like these really bizarre, brightly painted, like demonic graffiti faces on the wall, and they're lit really strangely and garishly, and you're like, didn't like Robin drive the Batmobile down this alleyway at one point?
Right, I remember this. Sure.
Yeah. So there's definitely an aesthetic to it that's very Joel Schumacher. That felt like I felt the whole time like I was watching like a Michael Jackson video being shot on like a soundstage or something. It was like really. I mean,
we felt like we were watching a music video the whole time.
Yeah, it did feel like, and like it's so sparsely populated. There's nobody but these, doctoral students and like a couple of hobos around, burning trash fires like the ones that Jason was asking about the other day on Facebook.
Yeah, we both cheered when we saw. He's like, yeah, trash can bonfire.
Trash can fires, yeah. Like there's nobody else living in the city. It's like uninhabited, which kind of lends itself to like this ethereal kind of ghostly. And I think it helps a little bit. It is very strange and a little jarring for like 2017 sensibilities. But once you get past that and you kind of get, if you're willing to like give yourself over to the Schumacher vibe and aesthetic, then you can really have a lot of fun with it. And the performances are really, really good, really solid. I mean, they're working with kind of a weak script. And the thing that you said a little while ago about an anthology, I think that had they pursued that a little bit more and dug more deeply into each one of the doctoral students' past and built that up more, I think it could have been a little more fascinating and maybe cut down on some of the interactions among them that were kind of repetitive and so forth. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was a nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon watching it, so I have no complaints.
Yeah, I want to. I don't have any opening thoughts to be any different from what you guys are. In fact, to the extent that I do, I want to get right into it as a topic, which is this sensibility of Joel Schumacher. I think that's my first topic. Is we are in Schumacher land, and what's so funny is that Joel Schumacher made a lot of interesting films, and to the extent that some movies he made don't really fit this, like he made A Time to Kill, and A Time to Kill does not have what I would call a Joel Schumacher look, but this one definitely does. I mean, every place that they go has steam rising up. There's a point where where Kiefer Sutherland is recuperating from his own near-death experience, and in this movie, recuperating means that you feel cold and they put a blanket around you and they feed you soup, right? And so they take him to like this, I guess, outdoor sushi place in Chicago, presumably is where they are, and they're sitting, on the the back of this truck, this army truck that Kevin Bacon has, and there's like fog everywhere, and they're under an L, and you're right, the city's completely empty, and it really looks like like a Berlin video or something. There is no it and it
I
complete
wonder
and
how many fog machines they employed during this.
Oh my god!
Oh my
Fog
god!
machines.
And there's all these on points where they're walking through graveyards, and it sounds like I'm making fun of it, but I'm really not. Points where they're walking through graveyards, he's got probably these big blazing lamps hidden behind like every tombstone, and they've got gels on them, so there's green lights and red lights and smoke everywhere. Kiefer Sutherland is never without a cigarette in his hand, even when he is dealing with patients. It is really, there's texture everywhere, and that's what
And by the way, speaking
Schumacher.
of dealing with patients, that is not like any medical school or hospital or anything I've ever seen. It looks like somebody, like maybe there was a hurricane and they had to evacuate, or tornado or fire or something. They had to evacuate the hospital into the local Catholic cathedral.
Right. Obviously, this place only exists in basically the U.S. of Schumacher, because there's
Yes.
no way that this would be a functioning hospital or a medical school or even their apartment. There's no way that a med student is going to live in these sumptuous places with the neon lighting and everything else. I buy the fact that typically whenever we would see, things bathed in color, whether it's blue for Kiefer or whether it's, red for Julia or whatever, whenever you saw a shift into color, it would always sort of mean that they were going to hallucinate. There's going to be an intrusion of the other side into this world in some way. You just have to look for it in some cases.
According to the IMDb, the colors aren't about the people. It's about like good versus bad stuff happening. So if it's like orange, that means it's going to be something positive and kind of light and good. And then if it's blue, it's going to something bad's about to happen. Deep orange color is usually a sign of promise and positivity. Positivity is what it says. So it's interesting that you kind of associated with Julia as opposed to a kind of a mood, because I hadn't really noticed the colors until I was reading this movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess.
Well, you know that like the red,
and
with Julia's story, the red, every time her father is about to show up, like wherever she is starts going extremely red, and like the bathroom lights up red or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know what specifically that would mean. If the orange is positivity and blue is something bad, I don't know what the red is.
But what's surprising is, particularly when Kiefer crossed over, what we sort of were looking at is the real world went into basically a grainy black and white, and everything else was in color on the other side. And then when they were intrusions, they were more color. Now, the place where this sort of, it doesn't break down exactly, but the language changes slightly is, I'm going to just skip to the point where basically the kid comes after Kiefer in the army truck. The color change doesn't happen. It's a little bit darker, and we go to the Evil Dead, camera as something's coming up to the truck, and the only thing you see that's of any color whatsoever is a flash of the red hoodie the kid's wearing, and that's it. Otherwise we don't have that shift. That was actually a good moment
too.
It is and it isn't, because I didn't like that we just keep going around the truck. I was just kind of, and then he doesn't even end up being near the truck. It was kind of, I don't know.
The editing there is off. The editing is off because like we go from like kind of expecting something to happen, and then we cut over to Kevin Bacon making his apology, and so there's like this long interval, and it kind of deflates the tension of So.
I want to back up for just a moment and explain for those now that we've talked about sort of the aesthetic of the film, which again is this sort of very gothic, completely unrealistic look, and I'm curious whether the new movie will employ that at all, or if that will just be a 90s thing, a Schumacher thing that will not be brought over into the 2017 version. But the basic conceit here is that these medical students are going to each, it's Kiefer Sutherland's idea. They are going to induce a death, essentially. That they will give themselves, I guess, heavy sedatives. They're going to do all these things that will stop their heart and then stop their brain, and they will try to note whatever experiences they have, and then their friends will bring them back to life using life-saving techniques. All of that sounds, I guess, vaguely plausible, but deeply irresponsible. And
deeply irresponsible. And to me, that brings up the point that these are like this film suffers in characterization of the same fault that lots and lots of films like Prometheus and so forth suffers, a complete lack of understanding of the way people who are doing like in this case graduate studies in medicine would actually behave in the way they think and so forth. These are these are just a bunch of like just average Joes. The way they're behaving is like a bunch of average Joes who have some equipment and can kill themselves and bring themselves back to life. There's no semblance to reality here at all about the way medical students
gives lip service to the notion that Kevin Bacon is the most brilliant of all of them. He's like a Top Gun level genius with his fingers, practically magic, and supposedly Julia Roberts is like it. These are supposed to be the best of the best at this school. But
yet let themselves be roped into something that's deeply unethical.
Right.
Sure. I mean, the deal is though that clearly, no medical student would really do this, nor would a medical student even have time to consider this. Typically, however,
true.
Being that this is the 90s, the early 90s, and these are sort of star vehicles, we are meant to. I think first we have to look at it through the 90s lens to a certain degree, because I think the time that's transpired between when it came out and now, we certainly are, I think, or even as a movie-going audience, a good deal more critical about these sorts of things and have a much clearer and deeper understanding, if not of the profession, then certainly maybe of like the kinds of people who might be. And I'm talking about media has even given us a deeper insight. House. I mean, we've had any number of St. Elsewhere. I mean, anything. Just basic television has given us, any number of I think opportunities to get a deeper idea and education. I think in this case, the film assumes that the minute you meet the stars of this picture, you're not gonna kind of go, hey, wait a minute, Daisy wouldn't do that. I think you immediately are. You immediately kind of go, Kiefer could convince me to maybe do this. All right, sure. I want to see what happens with this. And I think you're just sort of left like everything else. The color and the style and the mood and the stars, I think, are meant to just make you go, these are not the droids you're looking for. I think really sort of easily and quickly, and I think you no longer look at it with a critical eye.
Yeah. It works if you're not in the medical profession. Now, my father and Jason's mother are both in the medical profession, so they can't watch anything like this. They can't watch ER. They can't watch Grey's Anatomy. They're so irritated by how unrealistic everything is.
I remember
but the rest of us are like, well, whatever. We'll suspend our disbelief and go with it.
Well, you get down to it. You want to see, if these are the characters, as they're being portrayed, you want to see kind of what happens. You kind of go, okay, whose story is this? You kind of go, it's Kiefer's story. Okay, I get this, and the other guys are brought in. They all have their own things, but this is really kind of his story. I want to see where it goes, and you forgive at least the conceit of it and the fact, you try to silence the little voice in your head where you go, wait, where are they? What did he just do? What? What's that blue blanket
By the way,
for?
as to where they are, I just want to point out, as to where they are. So first of all, yes, it's true the medical school looks whack. I mean, there's a point where they are moving a gurney down to an operating room, and they're moving through this strange, poorly lit Gothic hallway, which is part of Loyola University. But the experiments they're doing are are literally in a Gothic cathedral that is closed off and locked up and is being refurbished, which is crazy. That is in other words, like the place that is haunted by the little dwarf in Don't Look Now. That is where they're doing the experiments. It is nuts.
Wow, that's a reach. Good one.
Oh, thank you. Well,
that's
the
great.
dwarf wore a red coat, so it made me think of it. But seriously, my mom, I remember watching this, and she goes, "This is the stupid." She goes, "First of all, why is she wearing a bra?" She was very upset that Julia Roberts wasn't naked when they were trying to freeze her to death. She was like, all these people should be naked. That's number one. In fact, I would put them in a bathtub and douse them with ice, because there's no way you're going to get their body temperature low. And I remember she spent a long time, just sort of working
because
her
I think
way
the body
through
temperature
how
down to
exactly
86. Yeah.
No blanket, no stupid electric refrigeration blanket. I don't even know if that's a thing that exists.
No, but it
They
sure
have a
looked
magic
good.
blanket. Yeah, sure. And it was easier than. Can you imagine if that had been the way it is? If it was like, all right, Kiefer Sutherland, we're gonna put you in a big clawfoot bathtub and pour ice cubes on you,
and you're gonna be naked.
Well, wait a second. Now, hang on. Now, I would have read. What was the film? All of you, but Jason in particular, with Boris Karloff, where basically he would freeze himself basically to suspended animation almost, and they used giant chunks of ice, and he would it wasn't Isle of the Dead, what was it? It was one where they would use these big hunks of ice and just stack them on people, and then he would resuscitate them. This was sort of like a 1940s, I want to say, Flatliners.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a 40s movie. I'm ashamed.
The Man with Nine Lives?
No.
Was it The Man with Nine Lives?
It sure might be. That sounds pretty good. And I think so, because then he used the pocket machine to basically bring them back. And he would basically be doing the same thing. He didn't have a hip and cool blue blanket. He had chunks of ice that somebody had hacked out of a freezer. And it was fascinating to watch that. And this, in a weird way, kind of borrows, maybe even, not metaphorically, but certainly in terms of its the image of it or the sense of it. It's sort of interesting to sort of, that these are the images that you sort of get conjured up. So this, in a lot of ways, you go, okay, the hunks of ice are replaced by the hip and cool blanket, again with color, because it's a thing that is the doorway. Apart from communicating cold to us while Kiefer shivers, it's also the fact that this is the doorway to the other side, and therefore more color. what's interesting as the
Yes.
other color is being leached out of the room. That's the most brightly lit and the most colorful object that's there. It almost
That's
becomes
right.
the cocoon that kind of releases him into the sort of the other side.
Yeah, it's blue when it's knocking you out, it's red when it's waking you up. And the conceit of this film, just so that we can get into this part now, each of these guys, I'm leaving out the order that they go in because it doesn't really matter. In the anthology sense that we were talking about, each of these people experiences a thing where when their body is dead, supposedly, this is what we're given to understand, they experience a traumatic story from their past. All of that would be fine, but what happens that's odd and what's a horror movie like kind of thing is that when they come back, the experiences seem to follow them around in their daily life. So let's review what they are. Kiefer Sutherland has a bullying story where he threw rocks at some poor child who was in a tree and
Yeah.
contributed to that child's death. Uh, Julia, do you remember what any of the other? Does anybody remember what any of the other?
Well, yeah, obviously, like we talked about
Sure.
that that Julia Roberts' dad tries to kill himself, but she doesn't know what the story is of why he ended up dead
So,
in
like all
his
children, she
truck.
feels guilty
Yeah, she feels
about his
guilty because
death.
she didn't know, but it turns out that he was shooting up. The other one is it's another bullying story with an African American girl that Kevin Bacon, and then Kevin Bacon has two. Kevin Bacon actually has the oh wait, no, I'm lying. Kevin Bacon has the African American girl that they bullied, and then Billy Baldwin has all the girls that are have he slept with, all the girls he's loved before, and
that he's surreptitiously been filming.
Yeah,
Sorry?
he's been doing
He's been
voyeur
surreptitiously
porn.
filming them.
Yeah, he's been
It's-
filming them, and he's
the-
also been the whole time. Well, not the whole time, but he's continued to do this while he's been engaged to.
Isn't this
another-
also the second time that we've seen Baldwin in a surreptitious sexual cinematic situation?
Are you thinking of Sliver
Sliver, I am
of
indeed.
that
I am.
that cinematic jewel Sliver?
It's
Yeah.
like you're going.
I
It's
sit
like,
in
wow,
that.
he's just kind of going, okay, so this is a thing now. He's the one who's cast as that guy.
Yeah. It's funny that this is the one that is the least like the others. But it's his thing to bear. Yeah, Billy Baldwin is engaged, and yes, he seduces a lot of women. Oddly enough, the guilt that he feels because each of them gets followed around by visions from the visions that they had, and it's unclear, except with Kiefer Sutherland, how real those visions are. But the guilt that he feels is about the fact that he lies to all of these women. He doesn't just go, "Listen, I'm looking to hook up with somebody, and I'm engaged, and I hope that's not a problem for you." He's seducing
Right,
each of
it's
these
not
women.
her. Yeah.
Right. He's in love with them. He says he's in love with them. He's fooling them, and he's also filming them secretly, which is all pretty yucky, right? And that story kind of resolves itself needing no supernatural aspect at all.
Well,
Um,
there is a supernatural aspect that doesn't require supernatural resolution, but he does get
Yeah.
sort of progressively more confronted by video images and then ultimately physical images of all the women
Yeah.
and everything else, and he eventually finds his fiance who hits it on the head, just kind of like you did, kind of saying it wasn't about the women. She could have dealt with that. It was the fact that he lied to all of them, and
right. But the thing that's different really about that story, Adam, is that with the other characters, they do something to resolve the problem, and for Billy Baldwin, it just happens. He doesn't choose to reveal this to his fiancée. She catches him. He calls her, and there's the urgency in his voice, and she notes something, and so she comes to his apartment and she finds all the videotapes and so forth. And so to me, there's something like less satisfying about that storyline in that he didn't do anything. And I would have liked to see that because she was the one to discover it, that it didn't cure him of the visions, and that it would keep going on because he's not done anything.
That's a good point.
So we could have gone
Yeah.
a little bit deeper with
Yeah, I
that.
think
Frankly,
so.
I would like to have seen something besides another bullying story as well. Despite the fact that this one ended up in a tragedy. It would have been nice to have maybe not seen. It felt like sort of the same thing, but not entirely. I guess we're meant to, since we don't exactly know what it is until the end, really, or near the end with Kiefer, like what the actual consequence was. But it seems like it would have been nice to have had something else.
Well, yeah, like I
so
thought
yeah,
when he drives off that he was going to go see his family, the kid's family or something, instead of I'm going to go kill myself. Because really, Kiefer's plan is to go and put himself under at their little weird
and I guess
lab.
confront the kid, I guess, is what he's going to do. I mean, it sounds like
confront him but die, because there was no way for him to bring himself back, and he didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, he won't come back.
But he does kind of like hint to his friends that that's what's going to happen, and he calls
Yeah, but he
Julie
doesn't
Roberts
say,
up.
"Come save me. I'm going to do this." Like, I don't know. Yes, I guess
Well,
you're right that in a subconscious way he might have, but he certainly didn't allow for
it does feel
the
very
time.
suicidal. You're right. It does feel very suicidal.
Yeah,
like,
I got the impression that it was definitely, he was gonna go. He says, I thought I paid my debt, blah blah blah. When he had been blah blah blah. It was a terrible thing to say. I thought I paid my debt when I went to reform school or military school or whatever, and then it turns out that for killing the kid. But it seems that the next step would be, well, I guess I have to pay with my life. And he even says, when he's doing the thing, he goes, I'm coming for you. Was it Billy? Huh?
Yeah, Billy.
He goes, I'm coming for you. I mean, so you get the impression that he's gonna go, and a reasonably tearful goodbye, I think, to Julia Roberts. He wasn't gonna. I think he just felt like he'd been pushed to a point where he was just going to try and end it as best he could. The thing is, we're talking about all these guys, and I mentioned this before the call. That is, it's interesting that Oliver Platt is the only character who does actually cross over. And he's also the character who is sort of obsessively speaking to a recorder and talking about his autobiography, his future autobiography. Essentially.
Yeah.
I found him to be a useless character, kind of.
Well, I think
pointless.
he's meant to be. I think in a way, we could speculate on this a little bit, because I think he's, in some ways, we're not Kiefer, we're not any of these people. I think he's sort of meant to be us in some ways. He's the one who's observing this stuff. He's recording a chunk of it. He has his mini tape cassette recorder out all the time. Baldwin, of course, has the camera, but God, he always has the camera. I think he represents,
viewer.
He's a guy who's never done anything. Apparently, he hasn't risked anything, so he hasn't lived, so he hasn't. It's interesting that he's a guy who when Julia Roberts leaves and they're threatened with discipline, he stays put. He's the one who's going to call the police. He's the guy who, largely is the one saying, "Don't do this, don't throw away your career." He's the one who plays it safe the whole time, and I just wonder if he's meant to be the object that they all press again, but he's also the one who has no sins to speak of because he's never risked anything, and maybe that's it, and he's meant to sort of be that, and he was sort of this weird counterbalance to all of them, kind of rocketing across and trying to one-up each other in some ways and negotiate for who can be under longer. I guess they needed that one guy who was the semi-voice of reason, but what is he?
I guess he's the contagonist. Now that you're saying it, I'm thinking he's the contagonist, because there is no real antagonist except for just, death. And like these individual people, each of them individually has an antagonist. It's their own, the person that they've
And just to recap, the idea of a contagonist is somebody who makes your goal more complicated just by basically getting in your way. But I think he's an imperfect contagonist. He's not like a solid, really well designed contagonist would be if you can imagine
like
there was
a professor that shows up and
the dean of the medical school.
Yeah, who's who knows about their experiments and is constantly threatening them or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's nothing like that here. This guy's just
Oliver Platt. He squeezes that bag really well. I mean,
that's all he does.
He squeezes that bag.
And he comments on how things aren't working.
He likes to say nothing a lot. Literally, the word nothing. It's like, they're like, do we have a pulse? Nothing. That's his only line.
But along these lines, one of the things that kept bugging me as like the final kind of weak line, "Today wasn't a good day to die" or whatever was said, and the camera zoomed away, was like the mechanics of this afterlife thing. So, like, think about it for a second. So, Kiefer and Julia, they both have a dead person in their past. So when they cross over, that dead person actually, it appears anyway to me that their spirit latches onto them somehow. But in the case of Billy and Kevin Bacon, there isn't any kind of spirit to latch onto them. It's just like their own guilt that's manifesting itself. And so I'm wondering, does that mean, in order to make the mechanism like uniform, then you could propose that neither Julia nor Kiefer are actually interacting with the spirit at all. It's always guilt. It's always just their own minds.
I think that's
very
possible.
That's good, and that actually brings into sharp focus the scene and the shot with the confrontation in the truck with Kiefer with the ice axe.
Yeah.
It's very ambiguous because the kid is gone when Bacon comes and rescues Kiefer Sutherland. But either the kid was there, and I'm asking. It's more of a question.
It's just ambiguous.
I don't think it's ambiguous. I think we actually see what's actually happening when Kevin gets into the thing, because Kiefer's clearly still struggling with the kid when Kevin Bacon gets into the truck. So I think the kid has never been there, and he's always just been fighting his own conscience and attacking
I think that's
himself.
entirely possible. I think it's always potentially subjective. So, I think it's just meant to be ambiguous. It doesn't work then it's as marketed as a ghost story. So if something has come back with us now, and that's, if you think about it, you go, they went across, these guys who were sworn to save lives, who have taken an oath to save lives, have gone across to conquer the biggest question. They've gone across to death, and something's come back with them. Now, when you hear that, you go, oh, well, obviously, it's ghosts or spirits. It's Stir of Echoes. It's the Kevin Bacon of the future.
Yeah, Argento could do that
Kevin
story.
Bacon of the future.
Yeah. It's going to be
easily enough. All you got to do is
a great Argento movie, by the way. That would be just fine. And I think that's how it was. That's certainly how it was marketed. That's certainly how we saw it. And I think that may have been one of the things that there was this gap when people saw it in the theater. They're kind of going, I'm sorry, was that a supernatural? It's really hard for me to tell. Or is it, as Julia says, it was all in Kiefer's mind and he was hitting himself in the head with an ice axe this entire time? And what does that mean? And will that change in the 2017 version when they go, you know what, fuck this.
It's really
we're cranking this to 11. And we're going to go ahead and make this thing a supernatural movie.
It's The Grudge.
I think it's interesting that Kevin Bacon's theory of how, remember how we talked about,
he's the atheist,
before, in sequels, things that were kind of a little unclear and ambiguous in the first movie get more concrete, and things start to take on names and you develop rules. And if this were to have become a long series of things, Kevin Bacon's theory would become the default way to handle what comes back, which is amends. His notion is whatever it is, you go find it and you go talk it out and you do an amends with them, alcohol style. And actually that works for him. It completely works for him. He even has a kind of a report afterwards where he's like, I felt so much better. There's that whole thing. So and in fact, Julia Roberts does the same thing. She goes and she has sort of an amends or an airing with the vision of her father,
seeing what actually happened and recognizing, because and then so like the agnostic view of all this, because the Kevin Bacon procedure for clearing this up is agnostic about whether there really is an afterlife or not. And maybe this is just you're brain dead for a while when you come back, and this deep-seated guilt that you feel comes to the surface and fucks you up until you make amends. And so I guess Julia's story complicates that, because when she was a little girl, what we see of her memory, she could not see what her father was doing because he had his back turned to her. But she's able to see that he's, injecting himself with heroin or whatever the fuck it is. And in her vision, so that kind of complicates this kind of theory.
It doesn't mean necessarily that she actually is seeing a new thing that she didn't see before, but rather that she, as an adult, is able to understand what she saw.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly
She's like, I see, if there's a guy sitting at a bathtub with his back to me, and then he flips out and runs down the stairs and goes and shoots himself, he's probably shooting up, and that's what I understand now is what was going on. Especially if she had other.
Especially if she,
drug
maybe out of the corner of her eye noticed, the spoon and the the rubber thing for tying off his arm or whatever, and
or
it's been
she'd
repressed.
seen him doing it before, and didn't know what he was doing.
And she was like 5, I think, when this happened. So it's perfectly plausible that some fragment of that would, that she didn't understand would like resurface after a near death experience.
The only one that's super complicated really is the Kiefer Sutherland one, which I guess we have to assume that it's an illusion all along. There was no ghost, but there's a Twilight Zone-ish kind of aspect where many times on Twilight Zone things turned out to be somebody's own imagination. It wasn't really real, but there's always a slight sting where it leaves you the possibility of the supernatural, a little bit of sand in Robert Cummings' shoe, or whatever.
Well, and I'm not saying there's no ghost. I'm saying there's no physical person. Like there's no physical thing to see for anybody else except for him. So it could be that there's a ghost, but we don't. I don't think it has to. The point is that he's doing the physical part himself, and that's why he's the only one who gets. Because first you're like, what's
no, but there is a slightly different take possible, Julia, where at that particular moment when Kevin Bacon, smashes, instead of going through the open flap in the back, smashes the rock through the fucking. I was like, "What are you doing? What are you?" And then of course, a couple scenes later, the windows. Fine.
Good point. Good
but
point.
I have a flap in the back.
Yeah. So you can imagine a scenario in which, at that moment, Kiefer Sutherland has lost the baseball bat. He's got his hands on the pickaxe as well as the boy, but Kevin Bacon can't see the ghost boy. All he sees is Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland's hands on the. So there's that thing, and so Kevin Bacon comes along. Yeah. The ghost is like, fuck it, I'm out of here, and then we're left with the scenario that we have. I don't know.
It could be, but I just feel like if that were the case, that he wouldn't still be fighting the axe at that point. He would have been like, oh, now I don't have to fight the axe anymore, and he still seems to be really struggling.
Yeah, as
if from going into him.
Yeah.
It's I want to move on to some other aspects of this. That if a person is listening to this show and wanting to watch Flatliners, I'm so fascinated by the fact that next week we're going to see Kiefer Sutherland in this movie playing this role that he played in 1990. And, so this is like a quarter of a century. We're seeing this more and more lately, actually, where actors, through some way or another, manage to go back to a role that they played a long time ago. I mean, Mark Hamill actually playing a role that he played first in 1978, right? This is up there, though, because this is 1990 to 2017.
27 years, yeah.
It is so 90s. And I mean, no disrespect when I say that. I mean, really so late 80s. I mean, you look at like...
It is really late 80s,
snapshot.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's an amazing snapshot of that time.
Yeah. Oh, the look, the clothes, like Kiefer is wearing this late 80s sort of getup that, I mean, I was affecting this look at the time. The long duster.
Oh, yeah. When you first see Kiefer, like that shot when they pull in, he's got his jacket on. I said, "Oh my God, Jason, that's you totally."
That's where
exactly
Jason
what he looked like.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. I mean, I watched it.
You had that for a while.
I completely wanted to be that guy. Kevin Bacon has his Tremors hair. I'm sorry.
Oh, he does. But weren't Julia Roberts and Kiefer Sutherland together?
They started dating. Yeah, they started dating during this show. Like they're during this filming of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and Julia Roberts is wearing these jeans that come up like to her belly button.
Oh yeah,
and are like they're so.
Yeah, no, that was the thing. When I was in college, that was the look.
I mean, they're totally. I mean, they just are what they are. You're either into mom jeans or you're not. I mean, all the guys are wearing these.
But at the time, that was the fashion. It wasn't mom jeans at that time.
No doubt about it.
This whole thing.
It's just when those women became moms that they became mom jeans.
This was very much an engineered. This was an engineered picture, and for all the right reasons. I mean, Molly Finn was the casting director, and she did a lot of work with Cameron. She did a lot of work. I mean, she was, between her and Mike Fenton of that time. These were studios and directors were employing people who could put actors together. These were definitely vehicles for these actors at this time. And the fashion and the style and everything else was meant to reach them and be aspirational in some ways too. And I think that was part of it. It was, how do you market this? This isn't exactly a 4-quadrant picture.
No.
But this is something they were definitely, trying to reach a demographic and outfitting, the stars in stuff that people would find,
Yeah.
attractive.
And this is
that
Kiefer,
they
like
would
3
want as
years
well.
out from Lost Boys, so he's, he's
Absolutely.
definitely, he's still a fashion icon at the time.
They all
Completely.
are dressed up. To Adam's point, this looks like and I keep saying this as though I'm complaining, but I'm not. It is the art that it is. It looks like a music video in the way that Schumacher is a designer, and he brought when he consciously does it, he does it all the way, and he did it with Lost Boys, and he does it here. And like I say, he doesn't always. I mean, like Time to Kill has none of this stylization, not at all.
But I think
It's
I think the stylization actually is part of its charm, particularly
yeah,
looking at it now through the lens of so many years having gone by. You can
yeah,
look at it and go, but unlike, I don't know, name some 80s or 90s picture that does not hold up. There's something
right,
to this where you go, I could watch this and, cast aside my sort of occasional, not an eye roll, but I might get caught on something that somebody says. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound real. But
right.
but I think Schumacher was very good at weaving, if not a story, then certainly a feeling. I'm going to use a nickel word, mise en scène,
Uh-huh.
and say that it was everything. They even had the what I think became the trademark Joel Schumacher party with the music downtown, much like
Yeah,
the saxophone beach show in Lost Boys. There's a musical interlude somewhere in the middle. And even though we didn't get the pantheon of soundtrack hits that we got with Lost Boys, we did have this moment of music that sort of broke things up. And I think that these are just part of the things that he would call on. And I think very early on, you are, maybe particularly now more than then, I think that you realize you're watching a Joel Schumacher picture, and you just put it in neutral, and you
yeah,
just you look at it extremely subjectively, and you say, all right, Joel, tell me. And then
yeah,
you kind of forgive it for the things that you go, and you lift it up for things that are doing well. And and maybe this is just me. Even when you look at it critically, you can look at it and say, okay, it's uneven in places. Like, this would have been better. This should have been better. But weirdly enough, it holds together enough to where it is far from. I've seen movies with you guys that have been unwatchable, and yet we sort of trudged through
yes.
them.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, this was
and-
not
and-
unwatchable. This was pretty. This
Not
was
at all.
pretty
In fact,
engaging.
it was enormously. It was like, okay, it's an okay story. What it reaches for, I think, probably is more thought provoking than what it actually reveals.
Yeah.
So I think that we kind of fill in the gaps, or we spackle in some of the rest of the stuff, but we just kind of go, look, it's like if Patrick Nagel was going to sort of illustrate a time and a place, and they were going to have med students, and this was going to happen. You go, okay, it's a very stylistic way of digging into it.
Sure.
Now, it doesn't always work well. I mean, we're always going to bring up Batman and Robin and go, this is a place where style trumps substance, and it didn't necessarily work. But I think
I'm really looking forward to
he
seeing what's going to happen with the new one, because the director for the new one is Niels Opla who's from Denmark. And he did the girl with the dragon tattoo, and he's done a bunch of foreign films. He's done some, I guess, Midnight Texas and Mr. Robot, stuff like that, Under the Dome. So all the stuff he's done is kind of dark. Sorry?
I think David's right. I think we're going to end up with The Grudge. I think it's going to be, The Grudge, meets, I don't know what the style is going to be. Probably, I know nothing about this, so I guess that's great. Do you know anything about this movie?
Nothing
Well,
other than that Kiefer
like,
Sutherland is in it, and he might be a tiny role. We don't know.
Yeah, but it's the same idea. Yeah. It's got Ellen
because
Page.
from what I understand from what I've read, it's not like that it's not like he's bringing the band back together or new recruits or whatever. It's a completely different character who gathers together people to do this. And then he may be the antagonist in this. He may be the person who, hey, fuck that! I did that 27 years ago. What are you doing?
Stupid.
Yeah.
We may find ourselves wishing for 1990s era Flatliners. And the new one may be fantastic, but there's something, particularly if you've seen this before, it's kind of like seeing old friends. And there's and I think it works in that level. I think this picture sells the stars as much as characters, maybe even more so.
No, you know what? He's not playing the same character. I've just looked at the cast list. No, his character in this movie is called Nelson something or other, and his character in the new movie is Dr. Barry Wolfson. So
but I think that's disinformation. I read somewhere because he actually because they said that first, and then he came out saying no,
same character.
I'm playing the character from the original film.
But he just has a different name for some reason. That's really interesting.
I'm dying.
No, I mean,
we'll see what happens. But it's Ellen Page and Diego Luna, so I don't think it can be too bad.
We're going to find out pretty soon.
Yeah.
I was going to find out within days.
Wall Street 2 or whatever the hell it was called. I was thinking, Charlie Sheen's going to show up, and he did, but he was literally on the screen for like 3 seconds. It was just a cameo, and it was so depressing. I was like, why did you do this? I wanted to see what happened to Charlie Sheen, and
they probably couldn't afford him.
Or who knows? Yeah, Charlie Sheen's a complicated individual. Anyway.
Or maybe they planned to use him for more than 3 seconds, but it was during his off times, not his immediately after rehab time.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Okay,
but but it's interesting. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think about, because we talked about it a little bit already, but what you think about whether this film actually believes in the afterlife, or whether it believes that it is just a weird, thing that happens to your brain as it's kind of shutting down. What is your thought, and what do you, how do you see the whole analysis?
I have an opinion about that. I mean, I don't think I'm not being sarcastic. I don't think this movie cares at all about the question. I mean, it doesn't seem to come to any conclusion or care. Doesn't really.
Yeah, I was going to say the not caring is important, because it's not like, I mean, it would be nice if what they were doing was deliberately leaving it ambiguous so that it was kind of up to you. But there's not a moment when even Kevin Bacon, the character who is purportedly an atheist, says, hey, you know what? All of this may just be blah, 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 comes some kind of pseudo-scientific explanation. There's not even lip service. He says at one point, in fact, so-and-so is in a better place now. I think he's referring to Julia's dad or something like that. And you're like, wait a minute, weren't you like just an atheist a couple of days ago? And now, I mean...
But I tell you what, I do think it's interesting that though we go back and forth, and I think it's probably meant to sort of take you, from one camp to another, then back to another. And then what's interesting is this is definitely Kiefer's picture. And then he starts with, today's a good day to die, and he ends with, David, as you pointed out, sort of weekly. Today was okay. But what's interesting is the last thing we're left with, and he's changed, because the thing he really does say at the end is not that, but he says thank you, which is something that he's never said before. So basically, you have to believe that he is freed somehow, and also a changed man because of the experience. He thanks these people who 15 minutes before was basically, calling them interlopers into his own thing. They're along for the ride. So he's treating them very badly. So at the end of it, this happens. Now, because he had a near-death experience. I mean, he definitely has. They want to demonstrate that he has moved along. Now, what's interesting is that when you pull out of that, because the film ends very quickly. So when you pull out of that, the thing you're left with, I mean, yes, you're in a church, but you are pretty much left with, a very large mural of God and the creation of the universe. And you are left with that, and credits roll over that. Yes, you're in front of, and you have choral music and everything else. So, despite the fact that I think it doesn't necessarily pick a side, I think what it does do is that I think it leaves you with this idea that he has been resolved, and maybe he's found his own heaven, in the sense that now he can be released from this thing, or salvation, or whatever, however you want to phrase it, whatever you want to call it. But in terms of the imagery, you're left with a positive. You're left with something which is he is a changed man, and you're left with the image of God at the end of it. And you've been saying, they've been looking at it clinically throughout all of this, and Kevin Bacon is an atheist, and they're trying to figure out what's on the other side, and is it a good place or not a good place? And even when he comes back, he finds some redemption on the other side. He's the only one who really finds redemption on the other side. So he comes back, and then basically he is freed. So then you're left with the image of God. which you can take it for what it's worth, but I think it's meant to leave on a positive note. I would be curious how this picture may have actually ended originally or in test screenings or whatever else, and that may be
if there were something else.
A way that this thing I think had to end. But I think you're left with a positive image, and I think you're left with the notion that there is something on the other side. But by virtue of just of the language that's being used as you're winding out of the picture.
I think that's all true.
Huh.
Again, it's probably like ridiculous of me to continue to expect some degree of realism in a film like this. But I one of the things that I was struck with, as things were wrapping up was, so here are these medical students who have obviously, read a lot about people who have died and come back and the things they say they see. And you have that whole montage at the beginning with Julia Roberts talking to people who have had these experiences. And at no point do any of them report having been haunted by whatever, they die and they come back.
Here's the thing about that. I read, because this is another thing that they mentioned in IMDb, and I remember hearing this. It's that people who have attempted suicide have had horrible visions.
Okay.
It's the people who are dying naturally who have come back.
But wouldn't that have been great if someone had just taken a moment to say, so why is this shit happening to us? And somebody said, oh, well, don't you remember? And, when people commit suicide.
Exactly.
It's a really good point. That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about that.
That's a great point. I had no idea about that.
Well, I mean, just that it's completely dropped. It's given no...
Well, it's not completely dropped, because Julia Roberts tries to go back and tell that poor old lady who's about to die, who actually did die, that she's wrong and that it's actually horrible, which I'm like, what is the point of that? The woman's going to die regardless. You just want to traumatize her right before she dies?
Since you have not actually...
To me, that underscores the point that that they're not thinking about how different their experience is from the other people's experiences, because, again, Julia Roberts talks to people, and even though it may be true in reality that people who commit suicide, and then are brought back have these kinds of horrible experiences, but there's nothing in the film itself that So
no, you're right. That would have been one line. It would have been one line.
Exactly. And it's just, to me, I mean, there's some wonky, I think who was it, Jason or Adam, who said, we fill in the gaps, and so we're watching it and we're we're imagining a better script than we're actually
we're actually given. True. Funny.
Well, we should definitely wrap up with our final thoughts, although everybody's sort of given most of them, but I'd like to give you a chance to lay out sort of a thesis. So the same order we did it, I think it was Joya, was it Joya, Adam, David? Okay. So Joya, Adam, David, and then I'll go. Joya, final thoughts, Flatliners 1990.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm really grateful that we did revisit, or that we did do this, and I got to revisit this film after all these years. I'd forgotten so much about it. I'd forgotten who was in it. I was actually confusing a lot of it, not the whole movie, but a lot of it with Jacob's Ladder. I realized after, I was like, there's a scene that I thought was in this film that must be in Jacob's Ladder.
Very different movie.
Now I'm interested. Well, yes and no, because there's definitely some weird visions, but I think the weird visions in Jacob's Ladder. And by the way, then when I want to do Jacob's Ladder, I also want to do Pink Floyd's The Wall, because to me those kind of go together.
Oh my God.
But anyway, it's like all these weird visions. But so this one was not quite as weird and surreal as I recalled it being, but it is weird and surreal. And I mean, I like it because I really like anything that is not, you talk about how it's silly to try to expect this movie. David does it's silly to expect this movie to be realistic at all, but really I kind of do expect it to be a little bit realistic, because it's talking about things that actually do happen. People do they do die, and then sometimes actually come back after having been clinically dead. So that exploration of what's happening there, and what maybe what you might see or not see, and that is very interesting to me, because it's not what we usually when we do horror movies and we're talking about things that none of us really believes exist. I mean, I suppose somebody does in the world, but most of us don't believe that that vampires are actually living forever on other people's blood and stuff like that. So those kind of things, or that people are bringing bodies to life that are made of a lot of other dead bodies. But these kind of things, I have more fun just kind of going, okay, that's silly, but if it were real, what would it be like? But this, to me, it's like, what, this really happens, and so what happens when people die, and what happens when, if they're brought back, and that kind of thing. So I enjoyed just that part of it. I enjoyed, plus, of course, the actors are great, and it's a really stylistically interesting movie, although I did find it completely unbelievable that there's steam and smoke every single place, and that people would have a medical school, hospital, or whatever it is in the in something that looks like a church, and that Julia Roberts' hair would be down the whole time. No. Stuff like that. But, it's really interesting. I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Wow, that was the sublime to the not sublime when you would when you come down to, or maybe the other way around, because Julia Roberts' hair is
It's pretty
certainly something.
sublime.
Oh, it
True.
is pretty sublime. Yeah. Adam, final thoughts on Flatliners 1990.
Look, this was like going in the Wayback Machine, Sherman, and kind of going
Yeah.
back and seeing, if nothing else, a picture from a time that should not hold up in any way. There's so many other ones that don't. And so much style was pumped into it, like a Duran Duran music video or anything else directed by Julian Temple, with the exception of Earth Girls Are Easy, I suppose. You really get this brightly colored, and in this case gothic style, with a story that is certainly interesting and thought-provoking. And it doesn't really give you a whole lot at the end of it, but I still stick by the idea that I think we spackle in the rest. But I think because of it, and I don't think I'm just remembering it as being better than it was, because I remember not really liking it very much when I saw it. I think probably because I was looking at it too critically, but now I think I may be looking at it through the eyes of nostalgia. But it actually is an interesting picture, and I think worth seeing again, particularly in light of the 2017 remake. And I keep hearing that they're considering making this into a TV show as well. So that seems to be at least if not in the works, and certainly in the rumor mill about potentially making this a series. But I think you'd be hard pressed to duplicate. It's silly in places, of course. It's but it's so brightly lit. It's ghost stories for the ecstasy generation. You really could, unlike Jacob's Ladder, which was horrific in my view, and had an ending that made you want to pour stalagmite down your throat at the end of it, and then The Wall, which sounds like a double feature that would land you into 24-hour psychiatric care. But okay, this is a remarkably.
That's what I love. I love stuff that totally. I love what
I think Adam is
call...
not signing up for that one.
I love. I was going to ask that. I was like, does that mean you won't do it if we?
Oh no, I'll totally do it. But I'm just telling you.
But I love what I call mindfuck movies.
Expenses.
Any movie that messes with your brain like that, I love that.
Oh, this is the equivalent of you going down like overboard over a ship, and then somebody comes to rescue you, and you go great, and instead of throwing you a life preserver, they throw you an anvil. It's really that thing, that double feature. Well, I'm not saying I won't do it. I mean, come on, look who I'm with.
He's down for it.
So, but what I love about this movie is I'm going to say that it's harmless in compared to those movies. But I think that it is a stroll through these metaphysical visions and these ideas, and it's on the whole it becomes something that is fanciful and interesting. It's sort of like there was what was it? What Dreams May Come, which was another film that Robin Williams.
Oh yeah, with Robin Williams.
And it's a very that is one that delves very deeply into all of this and about the things that we do in life and the things that happen in death. And that is a much deeper, more in a lot of ways more meaningful expression of this. This is a completely interesting and remarkably, I think, entertaining film, particularly when you know what you're looking at, when you don't expect more out of it. The minute you do, I think there's trouble. But I think it's a thing that you watch. You maybe don't put it on rotation, but I think you watch and you go, God, that was really good, I think, for its time, and I think it still holds up. So I'm actually glad that we saw it. We may find that that we'll miss it when we see the 2017 version, or it's going to go down, or Julia will love it because it's going to go down the path of the very, very deeply disturbing, which I don't know if it is or if it will or if it won't, but I think that we may find ourselves going, is this 1990s version at least the spiritual godfather of what we're going to see, and what style will that adopt? If the belief is that this is the kind of thing that a style piece, is central to the formula for kind of what makes this thing work, or was that the Schumacher touch, for its time, and it will be replaced by the new director's touch, whatever that is. And if it's anything like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, it's clearly not going to be the same thing. It may be beautifully shot, it may be decorated, and designed in an incredible way. But I think it will be interesting to see how these things will rub together and juxtapose, because you had these, deeply metaphysical, ontological questions rubbing up against enormous apartments with glass bricks and neon and a hospital that nobody would ever live in everywhere. And all atmosphere. So those things were rubbing up together, and somewhere in there was this experience. I don't know what we're going to see, but I'm glad we saw this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Wow. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like Adam, I was very glad to revisit this film and found it very enjoyable. Especially the acting of the characters, the trio of Julie Roberts and Kevin Bacon and Kiefer Sutherland, the way they play off of each other. I mean, they do a lot with a very thin script and kind of not particularly strong storyline. Intriguing concepts, as other people have said, but not delved as deeply as sounded as deeply as they could be. But I mean, they're actors that I love, playing off of each other in interesting ways and having freaky experiences in a very artfully arranged mise en scène. So I really, really dug it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with this 2017 version. I suspect that we're going to see something that's darker, that uses, a lot of jump scares. I don't know if you've seen the poster, but there's, suggestion of people's spirits being, frightened as they leave their bodies and so forth. So I think we're going to get something that's visually, as I've said, a little bit more like something like The Grudge or The Ring, or something somber and rainy Seattle-esque kind of thing. We're not going to see a lot of bright colors. It'll probably be gray and dismal, and if anything, there'll be like blue filter on everything. I bet you,
yeah,
I bet you a beer that there'll be a blue filter on everything. So,
I hate that damn thing.
Yeah. But it's got Ellen Page and Diego Luna and some people that I really enjoy, and obviously Kiefer Sutherland as well. So I have high hopes for it. We'll see. I'm certainly down for round 2 of these visits to the other side, and we'll see what these guys bring back.
My final thought is just, I'm really glad that I watched this, because I maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but I like that Schumacher really does commit himself to an entire look for a whole film that's more than just, a lot of times we watch a film today and and this maybe always was the case, but like a Technicolor film from the 60s looks like a Technicolor film. Comedies had a certain kind of look about them. Today, an action movie or a drama movie is going to be blue, or orange, or sometimes orange and sometimes blue, and that's about it. And this has a look from beginning to end that is very, very like thumbprinted, and I really admire that. I mean, as we've often said, we've watched a heck of a lot of movies on this show, so I'm kind of always looking for something that will just keep my eye open for the duration of the period, and that might be just sparkling dialogue, and it might just be something like this, which is essentially 90 minutes of kind of visioneering, and that's okay. And this isn't even expensive visioneering, by the way. This is visioneering entirely done just with set decoration and fog machines. I I admire it. So this was a really fun one to discuss. Let's do, to the extent that people have anything, and if you don't have anything, it's totally okay. But we tend to do endorsements. Anything that people have been reading or watching for the past
that you
week,
want to plug of your own,
or that you want to plug. That's always acceptable. We are not snobbish about that. You're totally down, totally okay to plug your own thing. But Joya, did you have anything that you want to endorse for us this week?
Well, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've been in the grocery store checkout and bought a magazine that I saw there. And today I decided to pick up something called The World's Scariest Places: Haunted, Creepy, Abandoned. It's this magazine that was at our Safeway by Centennial. Centennial presents World's Scariest Places. And I was flipping through it, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it's like mostly, I kind of am seeing it as one of those, kind of like on the internet when they're like, check off all the places that you've been or whatever. And I'm seeing it more as a kind of a bucket list of creepy places I want to go before I die and which ones I've already gone to. I've been to the Paris catacombs. That is definitely super creepy. Seattle Underground, a few other things. But anyway, it's kind of neat. So if you see it, maybe if you're at the grocery store, maybe take a look and see if that's something that interests you, if you are into creepy things.
Outstanding. Adam, did you have anything for us?
No, I don't think I do. I just, and I'll tell you why. I just wrapped up watching Twin Peaks: The Return.
Ah.
Mm-hmm. And that is another adventure in meeting up with old friends.
Yeah.
But I'm left with a very different sort of taste. So I don't know if I would recommend it as a thing, except to say, if you like the original series, it's an interesting thing to watch. I don't know quite what to make of it yet. It's amazing to kind of, I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Oh yeah,
but
all of us have seen it.
I watched it. I wrapped it up on the plane on the way back from New York the other day, and I was like, I just kept thinking, is Lynch just like letting the camera run here, and they're just saying just like a few extra moments, and we're going to experience the quiet together. Is it, what are all the different things that I'm going, and it became more of an adventure of trying to keep all the things straight in my head and fill in the spaces here, with this, with that series, as I was sort of doing with this, but it was much more effortless, I think, with Flatliners. But I don't know if I would recommend it entirely. I think it's an experience. It's probably worth seeing if you like the original at all. But as you can tell, I'm still grappling with it and sort of trying to come to grips with it. And I feel like I shouldn't have to. I feel like I should have been like, that was great. But I'm kind of like, oh, that happened, and I don't know what to make of that. So I'm just putting it out there, and I think it's because I had high expectations, but also realizing that anything could have happened, and almost anything did, or nothing did, depending on how you like to look at it. So that's just what I have. I know that's very unhelpful, but I've been.
No, that's okay.
It's been sitting with me for a while, and it's more of I want to throw it out there and kind of just put it on the table.
Yeah, I mean, what you're throwing out is, hey, I'm still contemplating Twin Peaks: The Return and trying to decide what I think about it. And I think that's a fair thing to say. And I mean, we could spend a whole episode really talking about Twin Peaks: The Return, and it wouldn't be an unfair thing for this show to do, because God knows that's a pretty horrific show, and we've done far less horror-oriented stuff. Okay, David, what do you got?
Well, I had a similar experience to Adam, wrapping up Twin Peaks, and to kind of cleanse my palate, I've been watching some very different, much more story-oriented kind of things, because I mean, to me, that's what felt like was really missing from Twin Peaks, is the storytelling. And I know that David Lynch isn't necessarily a storyteller, and that's fine, and I do that going in or whatever, but I like to have a story told. So one of the things that I've been watching with my wife on Netflix is this Spanish show. It's a 3-season Spanish show from, I guess, that spanned like 2011 to 2013, called El Barco, or the boat. And the basic premise is it's like a school boat where a group of 20-somethings are go on board to be trained by scientists and survivalists and stuff like that. And they leave Valencia and go out into the ocean, and then there is a scientific experiment goes awry. A particle accelerator causes a black hole in the center of the Earth, and the continents are sucked beneath the ocean. And so basically there's no land anymore, and a horrible storm destroys most of the boats that are still out at sea. And as far as these people know, they're like the only human beings left alive on the entire planet. And so it's a bit like a Spanish Lost in a way. If it were on the CW and had a lot of like really quirky romance and kind of almost slapsticky comedy stuff thrown in. So it's a very, very Spanish show.
That sounds cool.
It is
Actually,
really,
it does.
really cool. It's a lot of fun. We're about done with the second season, and there's also the kind of, a lot of things are clearly lifted from Lost, like this othery kind of thing, the shadowy scientific organization that's behind the black hole and all that stuff. But it's quirky and Spanish enough to make those kinds of cookie cutter tropes not feel too bad. And there's a lot of things that are really, really compelling about it, and the acting is really fine. And my wife and I are obviously Spanish speakers, so I can't say anything about the English subtitles. I haven't checked out whether there's English audio or whatever, but it's a fine show. It's something I totally recommend if you just want to have kind of like a rousing adventure story with lots of romance and so forth as well. It's definitely worth watching. And then I've been reading a couple of series. The Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin is like a Hugo award-winning fantasy series that I really, really recommend. And it's kind of like El Barco. It's also about a world on the brink of destruction and so forth. But it's just a very unusual and very unique story that a lot of people are getting into. The third book it's a trilogy. The third book just came out, and I'm almost done with it. I've rushed through all of them breathlessly. They're so good. And I've also been reading this manga series, a new manga series by the guys who did Death Note, Sugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata. It's called Platinum Ends, and it's basically about angels from heaven setting up a kind of contest on Earth to find out who's going to be the new god. And so it's lots of really, really, really cool stuff. And then driving around my car, because of how angry I am with Donald Trump and DACA and stuff like that, I've been listening to Prophets of Rage. The Prophets of Rage is like this, really, really cool super group that is basically members of Rage Against the Machine and Audio Slave hooking up with members of Public Enemy, DJ Lord and Chuck D, plus a rapper from Cypress Hill, Be Real. And it is just a blazing, blend, that kind of like blend of like new metal and rap, and very, very like 90s feeling, but with lyrics and sentiment that reflect our times. It's like, I can't recommend it enough. The single "Unfuck the World" is definitely on heavy rotation in my car when I get really, really angry about stuff. So those are my recommendations for the week.
Awesome.
Very cool. Okay, my only recommendation is definitely as far from horror as you can possibly get, but that's often the case with the stuff. Someday I'm going to be able to say that it's Moonlighting, but nobody's showing Moonlighting, and so my endorsement. My first one is just my sadness that for some reason, in a world where every possible show is available somewhere, I mean, even Hulu has Silk Stockings, a show that nobody was yearning to see in its entire. No, I'm serious. Although it does bear some re-examination because it has a lot to say, I think, about
No.
where we were
it bears
culturally.
some re-examination. Okay.
Yes. Yes. But
It
no,
bears.
but there's no Moonlighting, and I don't know what the hell that's about. Don't tell me it's about music, because Miami Vice is about. I have no idea why. Nobody can give me Moonlighting, so I would endorse Moonlighting, but it's not available. I'm sorry.
Sybil Shepherd found an injunction, probably. Who knows?
It must be. God knows. God only. Glenn Gordon Cairns does it, but no, it's a classic. So not available. So that's not an endorsement. It's not there. But I did this over the past several days. I binged like the first entire season of Red Oaks, which I love. And it's so funny because nobody in my cohort has been talking about this show, and yet it just got renewed for its third season, so somebody's watching it, right? But it's Red Oaks is a TV series that is on Amazon. It stars Paul Reiser as the president of a country club in New Jersey, and he becomes kind of the mentor and just troublesome nemesis of this young man who is between years in college and working as like a tennis instructor at this country club. And Jennifer Grey plays his mom, and there's a lot of sort of recognizable character actors in the background. And it's just a really wonderful comedy, sort of patterned after stuff like The Last American Virgin and Meatballs and so forth. But also it's just a sort of sweet, sometimes raunchy comedy coming of age drama set in the early 80s, and it's great. I'm really enjoying. Oh, so the music is awesome too. So I'm really enjoying Red Oaks, even if absolutely nobody I know knows this show exists, which is just sort of the way that that often feels like how my media diet feels anyway. So there we go. Red Oaks, you got to check it out. It's on Amazon. Gosh,
Thank
guys.
you guys for subbing in for Drew and Tony. I've decided
Totally.
that neither of you is neither of them because you're all very unique individuals. So you get
Very
to be
cool.
your own people.
Oh wow. We'll be back
Really
next
enjoyed it.
week with the new Flatliners. So I'm super excited. We're gonna keep this team together. We're gonna do Flatliners. It's gonna be fun. So if you guys are listening, if you like the show, come talk to us on the Facebook page and also leave a review on iTunes, because the iTunes reviews get filtered out to like every other podcast listening app. So leave us a review and we'll read it on the show. And I'm so happy to keep working. Have a fantastic week, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.